Welcome to the Station Wagon. I'm the older brother, Mark.
And I'm little sister Julie. This is the podcast where my brother and I give up something we take for granted and tell you how it goes.
Buckle up and enjoy the ride. Hi, everyone. In this episode of the Station Wagon, we're going to be giving up swearing.
That's right, Mark, you Big thanks to Nigel Bush for the idea. If you have ideas of things we might be taking for granted, please email your suggestions to wagonpodcast@gmail.com. Shout out to us on Twitter. We're at WagonPod, or connect with us on Facebook.
Thanks for that.
Thank you. I am having an extinction burst. You might have noticed. That's what we call it when right before behavior change.
Wait, who's the we?
We psychologists.
Right. You're a PhD, aren't you?
I am.
Perfect. Continue.
Okay. So an extinction burst is really common right before a deliberate behavior change. People like to go out with a bang. For example, if you're going to give up smoking, a lot of times right before that, someone will smoke a whole lot or overeat right before a diet.
Did you get it all out of your system?
Yeah, I'm good to go.
All right, cool. Let's define swearing, okay?
Yes, please.
So swearing, also known as profanity, we also call it bad language, strong language, coarse language, foul language, bad words, vulgar language, lewd language, cursing, cussing, or using expletives. So in this episode, we're giving up swearing in any of its forms. So, quiz, you ready?
Yes.
You sitting down?
Yes.
Perfect. Me too.
And I've been loving it. It feels so good.
Good. In 1972, how many words did George Carlin list off as the dirty words that you couldn't say on TV?
I'd say at least half a dozen.
Yeah, I think that's about right. He said 7.
What are they?
Well, I'm not going to. This is a family-friendly show, so I'm not going to list them here, but I'll link to it in our show notes. It's pretty funny. Here's another one. How many types of swearing are there?
Well, I guess there's the swearing when you're really enjoying something, like you take a delicious bite of chocolate pie.
Yeah, that's good. That's called emphatic swearing.
There's the swearing when my computer shuts down before I have saved something.
Right. I would call that cathartic swearing. Good.
Okay.
Ridding yourself of like negative feelings and by an outwardly expression.
Okay. What about when the dog steps on my foot and I'm barefoot and a claw pierces my skin?
I would actually consider that cathartic. Also. Yeah.
Okay. And then there is dopey, sneezy, grumpy. I don't know.
Okay. Do you want me to just tell you?
Yeah.
Because you'll know these, but so there's 3 others. So there's 5 total. There's dysphemistic, which is the opposite of euphemistic. So in other words, instead of making the listener understand what you're talking about by sort of pointing out something else, like saying, oh God, many euphemisms. Give me a euphemism, Julie.
Instead of killing, doing away with.
Very good. That's a good euphemism. So this is the exact opposite of that. That this forces a listener to think about the negative thing you're talking about.
Slit his throat.
Right. Or he her.
Okay.
Abusive, to abuse or to intimidate or insult somebody else. And then,
like what's big, stupid, smelly named Mark.
That's great.
Okay.
Totally shut me down for the rest of the podcast. And then idiomatic swearing. So this refers to something in order to arouse interest, to be cool or macho, or express to peers that the setting is informal. So like the next time you're at Chili's.
Give me some appetizers.
Exactly. Perfect.
Okay.
You nailed it. So 5.
All right.
And then one last question. What percent of our daily speech on average in the U.S. contains swearing?
Oh, I have no idea.
It was 0.3% to 0.7%.
Very interesting.
Right. So when I do it myself, I actually feel slightly amped up. And so it kind of like highlights that moment in time for me.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
To a certain degree, where it makes it feel like there's actually more swearing going on than probably really is.
Huh, interesting. What United States occupation do you think gets sworn at the most? Or induces the most swearing in customers and clients?
The dentist.
No, I was going to guess OBGYNs who deliver babies. But
oh,
yep. Dentist would be hard because your mouth is all full. You're like,
But you don't have to be able to vocalize to swear.
okay, the double deuce. Um,
Right.
yeah, so it's actually housing contractors and
You mean like a general contractor that's building a house or working on remodeling and stuff?
exactly,
Oh,
and
oh, God.
um, representatives of the cable company.
Oh, brother.
Here's a couple things we do know about swearing and using profanity. One, it's not controlled by the same language centers as most of our language. There's been a lot of patients who've had the Wernicke's area damaged that would make it so that it's difficult to speak, but they
Is that a
still,
part of the brain?
yes,
Okay.
but these folks, when in pain, can still curse.
Wait, hold on. Let me process that. So when they have this one special area of their brain destroyed or injured or something like
For
that,
some people, not every single person.
not for every single case, but for some people, they can't swear, but when they're angry, they can?
Right. They can't. So if you say
Wow.
to a patient who can no longer speak, say, they can't say, but if
She
they bang
just
their
said the
thumb,
S word for poopy since we had to bleep that out.
but if they hit their thumb, then it can come out automatically. And it's definitely involved in the amygdala, which is kind of like the most reptilian part of our brains. It's the oldest, meaning like evolutionary wise, oldest.
You mean
Um,
like it evolved earliest as our brains were evolving?
yeah,
That was the first
exactly.
first component to evolve?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's like all of the most base instincts like emotion and aggression and, the really fun stuff is back in the amygdala. And it's also involved in memory. So there seems to be some connection with swearing and improved retention of learning too, which is kind of weird. For example, they did studies of folks who were exposed to swearing. So like you said before, when you felt pumped up, they remembered things better than people who were not exposed to swearing.
Let's say I'm sitting in a boring meeting with at work.
Okay.
Not that ever people at work I have boring meetings, but let's just hypothetically say that that happens. If there's a lot of swearing, I will remember the content of that meeting, or does the person who's giving the content also have to swear while they're giving the content?
Well, this hasn't been applied in really practical applications, so I wouldn't want to promise. But based on the research I reviewed, it does look like if there's just someone swearing in the room, a little bit, not to the point where it's completely distracting, it kind of amps everybody up to the point where somehow they're paying better attention and have better recall later on what they were studying. And it's possible that swearing is kind of a cue of, hey guys, this is really important.
Well, that's one of the four types that we went over. So it's the emphatic type, emphasizing what's being said.
Right. But we also know that swearing seems to help with pain tolerance.
Mm.
So, for example, if there's this really, it's so fun to be a psychologist. So, there's a study where they made people put their hands in freezing cold water. Do you remember
Huh?
when we were kids and you used to sometimes make me hold an ice cube and then you'd like not let me let it go?
That never happened.
So, it was like that. And they would say, as soon as you can no longer stand it, you can pick your hand up. And they'd say to some people, okay, you can come up with a peaceful Zen word, or you can swear, you could say whatever you want. And when people are allowed to swear, they could keep their hands in for like 20% longer.
Huh.
So the swearing just kind of helped, but you can also habituate to it. Habituating is when you see a stimulus over and over or something, and then you just get used to it. So,
Hmm.
for example, like if you see a beautiful painting, you think, oh, that's so lovely. But if you see it every single day, you kind of get used to it.
If there's a person in my office who swears a lot on a very regular basis, eventually it won't amp me up anymore.
Right. And you can
Okay.
imagine that think of a really soft spoken person and she or he swears or just uses strong language when they don't normally. That's going to make you really, really pay attention more so. That's why when
Right.
you're yelling at your kids, you pick your battles. Just kidding. We wouldn't swear at our kids because swearing can be harmful. There are studies of kids' reactions to hearing swearing. It certainly has a negative impact. And of course, adults can react to emotional abuse very poorly as well. Psychiatric nurses, apparently, one of the difficult stressors in the working career of a psychiatric nurse is being sworn at by patients. Swearing can prolong an altercation, it can kind of feed aggression instead of venting it. And employees don't seem to like it when their leaders swear. Some
Interesting.
people say it can also make organizations more prone to lawsuits since so many of our swears are kind of sexual in nature.
So did you know that swearing started 1,000 years ago? 1,000 years ago, or the Romans, whichever was first. And before the Romans, no one sweared.
I just don't really buy that.
No, it's pretty much true because that's what I found in my limited search of the internet. The word which is the S word for poopy, that was found in some 1,000-year-old Anglo-Saxon texts. So that particular word is really, really old.
Okay.
Which is kind of cool to think about. And the Romans started us off using lots of different obscene words. In the medieval era, when we were talking earlier about how there's swearing and then there's cursing.
Yeah.
The idea of having a non-secular curse or swear was that it would basically rip apart the ascended body of Christ. So for example, like saying something like, by God's nails, you are actually hurting the ascended body of Christ, so you wouldn't want to do that. However, in the medieval era, obscene words weren't really a big deal because people had less personal space. So they were going to the bathroom together, sleeping in larger groups together, doing lots of personal and bodily functions together. So those kinds of things were talked about just way more readily. It wasn't until later when there was a rise of a middle class, and to make themselves better in sort of the Victorian era, they felt like they had to get control of their physical and language behaviors. And that's when swearing really became a thing that you weren't supposed to be doing anymore because they thought it would make them seem better than they used to be. Now, what's interesting is that the Victorian era, during that time, aristocrats were, of course, not bound by that kind of self-policing since they were really secure in their place in the hierarchy.
Now, again, the history we're talking about right now is pretty much limited to European history, correct?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
And actually, just to be clear, I didn't look into anybody else's history.
We'll let our listeners react on their own.
You know what? If anybody has some historical nuggets that they want to share about swearing in other cultures, we would love to see them. Post them to our Facebook page. Our challenge then is that we are going to be giving up swearing for 2 weeks.
But what exactly are we going to be giving up? I mean,
I was thinking that I would give up all swearing, even the fallback swear words that my kids can listen to. So
mother trucker.
Well, yeah, or like, oh, fudgesicles.
Shut the front door.
But for me, I wanted to give up the intent. So like if I felt like the need for a swear word, if I could think that quickly, I would try to reframe the way I was actually thinking so that I wouldn't need to swear.
Okay, what about like the religious types, like damn, hell, Jesus Christ?
All of that stuff I'm going to give up.
Okay.
Any of the 5 types. And okay, so going back to my quiz.
Yes, I remember.
I'm giving up the 5 types of swearing, and I'm giving up, let me just repeat it one more time for you. Bad language, strong language, coarse language, foul language, bad words, vulgar language, lewd language, swearing, cursing, cussing, and the using of expletives.
Okay, but lewd language. What about poopy head?
That's a swear.
Okay, what about
Do you need me to print this out, like fax it to you or something at your work?
Look, in our last episode, we came up with some terms that later you decided you weren't a party to.
Well, I promise I will like text you or something if I completely change my mind again.
Man, what about just saying but? But I'm not doing it to swear, but I'm doing it to make my kids laugh.
You are doing something idiomatic.
Yeah.
And I quote, refer to, but do not explicitly mention something in order to arouse interest, be macho or cool.
That's true. I'm thinking the one exception is going to be just when we're in physical pain because it's such an automatic response, but that we'll try to stop.
That's very interesting. So I think we should also have a swear jar.
Oh,
that we put 50 cents into at a pop.
50 cents at a pop. Okay, and then where are we going to donate all this money? Or are we going to give it to the other siblings?
I don't know. Let's think about that over the next 2 weeks.
The Society Against Swearing.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Or we could give it to one of the amazing organizations around here that helps support families that are overcoming abusive situations, like Safe Place in Olympia, Washington.
Perfect. Well,
what do you think is going to be the hardest for you?
Not swearing.
We're going to take a quick break, actually a 2-week break while you listen to the Pleasure Kills. And when we come back, we'll fill you in on our amazing success.
I think the more you grow up, the more people understand, like, swearing is just more extreme of your expression, so as long as you know how to express yourself, it's easier to control that.
It's just a stress reliever. So when another coworker and myself are just like swearing it out, it just feels good to walk away going, ah, it's relieved, I can move on, whether instead of letting it build inside.
I usually sometimes curse when, like, I hurt myself. That's usually my trigger, or when I get mad, but that doesn't happen that much. Usually just, like, when I get hurt, I might say it.
I don't really feel wrong about it, but I don't feel it's necessary in many cases. It's like once you use swearing, it's no longer effective, right? If you repeat it so many times, it just becomes a common lingo and doesn't even make the emphasis that it was intended to.
Well, I still have a little bit of that 14-year-old boy in me that thinks, gross things are funny. So usually I'll just kind of, pop my head up, stare at him, and grin like, ha 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 ha, you weren't supposed to do that.
I wouldn't be able to give up cussing. I have 5 kids.
Thanks, Boaz, Jen, Ailita, Kieran, Brandon, and Tanya.
So welcome back. It's August 17th, and this is the second half of our recording about giving up swearing. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Mark. How much money do you owe?
Let me get my swear jar. Hold on a second. How much do you owe?
$24.50.
Oh my gosh. What? $15.75.
First of all, I cannot believe that I swore more than you. I'm guessing I was much more stringent. I want to get into that in a minute. But second, How did you get 75 cents? Because I thought we were doing 50 cents each swear.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I had the swear jar at work and at home. And when I would swear at home, there was this one time that my daughter decided, I want to donate. And so she put in a quarter.
So you you included your daughter's charitable contribution.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's right. Yeah.
All right.
It was really interesting. At first, I thought it was going to be pretty easy. That the thing that we had mentioned earlier, where you only swear about 0.2 to 0.7% of the time.
Right.
I thought no big deal, but I found that there were so many times when I had to just course correct. I could feel it coming out of my mouth. And I did that old style movie thing, like where you put your hand over your mouth to keep it inside.
Wow.
Before it would come out. Yeah, it was weird. Really strange. Like sometimes, the things that triggered me really triggered me. It wasn't like I was making a conscious effort to swear. It was just things that were triggering me made these things come out. So, yeah.
Like what? Like what was your biggest trigger?
Probably 3 things. One was frustrations at work.
Yeah.
Reading an email and just wanting to catharsize a little, if that's even a word.
Yes, me too. That was most of my work swears was after reading emails.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, because it's harder to like be talking to somebody and then just go off on them. Right? I don't think I've ever really done that. So let's see. Then the other triggers for me were hurting myself.
Oh, yeah.
I tend to stub my toes a lot around the house. Yeah, so also at home, I had to pay the kids each 25 cents in addition to what I put in the swear jar. They wanted that extra.
I kept it very strict, pretty much like any language used in anger. The very first time I swore, some of my coworkers were talking about children eating their own snot, and I started to gag a little bit, and they thought that was hilarious, so they kept going on and on. Thank you, Rich and David. So I shouted, "You monsters!" and ran out of the room. I realized, okay, well, by our really, really strict criteria, that's kind of a swear because it's me using that word in anger.
Right.
So I know most people wouldn't really consider that a swear. Also, I felt like I was using it to show my team that like I felt their injury.
Right.
So like if someone else on my team told me something annoying that had happened to them, I'd want to say like, oh, that really sucks.
I also was keeping it really strict. So not just the 7 words from George Carlin. But also it was all about the intent for me.
So another thing is that at work, a lot of the phrases that we use have swears in them, like screw the pooch and snafu, situation normal, all effed up.
Right.
And so I counted both of those also. So at home, it was not cathartic. At home, it was more idiomatic. Doing it to kind of make my kids laugh or think I'm awesome. I used the word butt several times. Now,
and they thought that was macho, cool, or you use that to express that your setting was informal.
Exactly, but
Yes.
my kids are now to the point where like I'm starting to embarrass them, and so my youngest, it kept saying to me, "Don't use potty words," but that had nothing to do with the podcast. It's totally coincidence. She's just really sick of me using potty words these days. So she doesn't want me to say pee pee anymore. She wants me to say urinate, and she doesn't even want me to use the word potty, even though she can use it. She wants me to say restroom. So it's just, a 4-year-old trying to control their environment. But
Very
my
good.
older kid kept trying to trick me. Like, he would say, "Hey, mommy, copy everything I say." I'd say, "Okay." And he'd say, "La, la, la, la." And I'd say, "La, la, la, la." And then he'd say, "I'm a stupid face." Like, try to get me to say that, too. And
So, I mean, how many times did you fall for that before you caught on?
well, by the end of the 2 weeks, I was just like, safe place can use another 50 cents.
Right, exactly. Right.
Did you notice that you were just more aware of swearing and profanity?
Oh, absolutely. From myself, especially, and then from others around me, I started getting on kind of a high horse that I'd like to get off of to a certain degree. It made me feel like I was being lazy when I wanted to swear.
Oh, totally. They're verbal shortcuts.
It took effort to reframe what I was going to say so that it didn't need a swear. But I realized that I think I'm going to try to give up swearing unless it is for catharsis or to be abusive.
Yeah, you got to keep it for when you're being abusive.
Absolutely.
I'm just trying in general to be a little bit more cognizant of the words that I use. Trying to take a moment to think about it is helpful.
I found some help out there, and we'll put it in the references if you want to stop swearing.
Okay.
If you want to stop swearing, there's 3 different options. 1 is self-training, 2 is changing your attitude, and 3 is changing your speech patterns. So the self-training thing is interesting. You can get a friend's help, like if you're sitting there and you swear, have them punch you in the arm.
Okay. Real accountability in the moment.
Real accountability. Now, I heard that doesn't work if you're extra tough. You can avoid triggers, but it's real similar to gastrointestinal or migraine problems. You can keep a swear journal.
Yeah.
Oh, when my cat jumps on my leg and scratches the heck out of it, that makes me swear. You can keep a swear jar to punish yourself. You can, I don't know, what do you think about this one? Ping your wrist with a rubber band.
That is a thing. I haven't ever heard of that for swearing specifically, but for other behaviors.
Like what?
Like interrupting.
You can also have in your head, grandma is always in earshot.
That's pretty good.
It depends on your grandma. My daughter's grandma wouldn't care.
And one of them.
One of them. Right. You'd have to be really clear about which grandma is in earshot.
Wait, I have a quick question.
What?
Did you ever swear in front of mom and dad?
You mean like growing up?
Yeah.
No, I don't think I ever did.
I did once when I was like 16 or 17. It was when I was in physical pain and I got sent to my room.
What? So they sent you to your room, huh?
Mom didn't even know what to do. We just did not swear.
I don't remember really knowing how to swear very well until I was like in high school.
Poor Mark.
I know.
I remember Mom saying we couldn't say scum bucket.
What?
And so I used to say mucus sacket.
No way. I don't believe you.
That is a thing that happened.
And then the last thing for self-training is to avoid swear-happy media. So I guess it's kind of like being around that peer group. If you're listening to stuff or hanging out with people who are constantly swearing, then it's going to seep into your language also.
And you habituate to it. It doesn't activate you in the same way. It just becomes part of the words that are salient to you for your vocabulary.
Can you just say it all again without using the word habituate, activate, and
and salient?
Salient.
If you're reading Jane Austen books, let's say you get in like a huge Jane Austen kick.
Can we choose something different?
No. And you read all those books like right in a row.
Wait, is Jane Austen the one who did Pride and Prejudice?
Yes.
Could you say Pride and Prejudice and Zombies? I like that
No.
one.
And so you read all those like Regency era books all in a row. Then those words are going to be salient to you, meaning that they're the ones that are kind of like in your consciousness. You're reading words and phrases from those books over and over again. So, for example, a phrase that would probably be used quite often in those books would be the thing. Are you feeling quite the thing? Means, are you feeling okay? And so you might find yourself using that phrase, even though that's not really something people say today, but you're reading those books, you're kind of in that world, hearing it all the time. If you're watching, I'm trying to think of a real swear-happy show, Entourage, is that
what? Oh, how about The Young Ones?
Okay, you might accidentally quote some of the hilarious lines from that to your parents and get in big trouble. I, too, am going to try to swear less. I am going to use it the way I would someday like to use caffeine, which is sparingly so that when I do use it, it really packs a punch.
That's cool. And me too. I am actually going to put out a recommendation here, which is not something that you should do.
This is just entertainment.
Exactly. I'm going to recommend not stopping swearing because it's great for pain relief.
Yeah. Yeah.
Literally, I'm linking to a Scientific American reference that talks about how it can actually reduce pain during certain situations, which is awesome. So I'm not going to stop swearing. Definitely when I hurt myself.
Fantastic. I do want to thank the Pleasure Kills before we leave for the great...
Thank you, Pleasure Kills.
We love the song Modern Problems. Yes. And thanks to all the great interviews before and to our amazing spouses who let us do this.
We love you, children.
Oh, yeah. And our awesome kids. Thanks, kids.
Yeah, for taking part and for helping to contribute. And we'll figure out how to get this money to
Safe Place. And if you'd like to learn more about Safe Place, come visit us on Facebook. We're going to link to them. Visit us on Facebook. You can tweet at us at WagonPod. And if you have topic suggestions, please email us at wagonpodcast@gmail.com.
Or use Twitter or use Facebook, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's what's going to happen on our next ride in the station wagon.
I think edible utensils are fine.
Why?
How else am I going to eat chili? I can't really pour, soup.
You can drink it from the bowl.
I can't. My chili that I make is amazing, but very thick.
And the bowl will become a utensil in that sense.
Oh, yeah, it sure would.
Right? You could stick your face right into it.
I could, but I'm not gonna.
God.